Hello there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. For this show, I sat down with Koen. I'm going to butcher both of his names. Koen Vancampenhoudt. He's a Dutch pilot, but he's been living in the States, out in the Carolinas, for an awfully long time. And he and I had a really cool conversation. I wanted to reach out initially because it was recommended to me because he's just a fiend for paragliding. And I've been following his amazing flights over the years down in Brazil and all over the world. And then this year down in Valle, a lot of big flights went down, but then he broke the distance record, one-way record, flying in a lot of wind, and basically flew a good length of Mexico up over the plateau and by the Toluca volcano, and way, way, way beyond the task that we often do up to the lake up there to the north. And phenomenal flight, and really interesting, and kind of captured all of us who were interested in Valle because it had never been done. And then from there, we talk about risk and the wind and just how that day played out. And we get into he had these really cool goals before he turned 50. He and I are the same age, to complete doing the infinite, to fly over 400K. Really fun talk. Yeah, he's super ambitious and just has a really nice take on this sport we all love. A lot of takeaways here that I really enjoyed. So please enjoy this talk with Koen. And I can't imagine you're going to have time to listen to this during the X-Alps, but we will get it out, like I said, hopefully during the show, or it is a show, during the big show, the big race. And hopefully you're enjoying all the great footage we're capturing and the live stuff and engaging in the craziest race on earth. I love this thing. I'm really excited to go. So enjoy. Koen, it's great to have you on the show. I was psyched your buddy reached out and said, hey, you got to get him on, because I've been kind of meaning to do this with you for a long time. I know you're a very persistent paraglider. You put a lot of hours into this, and this year, the records have been falling year after year after year in Mexico. It's been awesome to see what people are doing down there. Valle is a place that's very close to, I know, both of our hearts. I go down there for the Monarca every year, and you go down and send it. And this year you went bigger than anybody'd ever gone. Why don't we start there, and then we'll dig into more of your history and past and some of these crazy stories you sent me, learning in Fiji and a forest fire. That'll be great.
All right.
But welcome to the show. Thanks. And what happened? What went down in Mexico this year?
Well, first of all, thank you, Gavin, for having me on the show. It's a great honor. It's great after so many years of flying to get a little bit of recognition of a couple of these things I've done. I'm in a kind of a small corner of the world tucked away here in the Carolinas. Nobody knows much about flying around here. So it's been hard over these years to get out of this little bubble here. And, fortunately, I'll tell you later about that. I've had my opportunities to fly in many, many different places.
And go to jail.
That too. We'll get to that also. Well, yeah, indeed. There's a couple of stories in that whole history, but Mexico. Yeah, Mexico. We both love Mexico. We've both been there a bunch of times. I love the place for many reasons, but this year was evidently really special for me with that great big flight I was able to do, which was actually kind of interesting because I was totally not planning on that. My goal for that day was big, but much smaller than that. I was hoping to be able to follow, the hot shots there on that typical triangle they were pushing, the 150, 200K triangle out to, what's the name of that place at the end there? And then back, I'd never done
out past Luvianos.
Luvianos, yeah. And then way further to, the southwestern there.
Out to Narco land.
Yeah, well, I don't inform myself over such things because if I would, then, you kind of limit yourself. And sometimes it's just better not to know certain things, which also applies to the flight I did. So I launched early. That was my first time, I think, launching that early. I'm used to launching early in northeastern Brazil and all that, but I hadn't really done that in Valle yet, kind of securing and flying with my buddies and all that. So this day I'm like, all right, I've done all the other kind of flights. I really need to try to push for this big triangle. So I'm going to launch together with, all these Henzi and Cedar and all these guys that were pushing it day after day, to get these big triangles, which was my goal. And we launched, I launched with them. Everything goes well, conditions are on, but I was not on the same radio frequency as they were. So I didn't know what they were actually doing. And I get to the end of DV0 by myself and I don't see anybody anymore, and I'm like, well, something went wrong or they changed their plans. I couldn't see them. I didn't know where they were at. And it was a windy day, way windier than expected. And well, I really didn't feel like pushing hard against the wind all the time, all day long. And I was looking backwards, like on the northwest side of the lake of Valle, and the sky looked just like plastic. I mean, it was like early and it was already fully set up with beautiful cumulus clouds and everything. And the natural tendency was for the air mass evidently to push that direction. So I'm like, hell, I'm just going to give this a shot because that actually coincidentally, just a few days before that, I had to visit a customer of mine because this was theoretically sort of a work trip a little bit, so I went to visit this customer in Querétaro, which is a couple of hours north, from Valle. And I rented a car for that, went there, drove through these plains. I've been there before. I saw those plains. I'm like, man, I mean, this must be epic flying here. It reminded me of northeastern Brazil, which, I'm very familiar with. So I kind of had it in the back of my mind as a possibility to try to get there someday. On previous trips, I'd gone past, Lake Victoria and something and had some pretty nice flights in that direction, but never was able to really push further than that. And this day, I mean, I'm just like, well, heck, I'm just going for it, So, I got high.
And that's high. Those that are listening who don't know where we're talking about, let's give them a little bit of, so Valle's down a little bit. There's the little reservoir there, the lake and the town.
Right.
And then north of that, the terrain just keeps climbing to get up to I don't know what they call that plateau. Is it the Toluca Plateau?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's called either, but it's it's right where Via Victoria, or, Lake Victoria is. Yeah. From there on, it's just flatlands. To the
flatlands and high. It's and there's airspace too. The Toluca airport there is that's a pretty major airspace that we always have to be wary of when we're going to Lago Victoria, and it's always windy. It's always windy out of the south.
Right.
So going north makes sense.
Well, but yeah, before getting there, like I said, I was at DV0, which is kind of that point where you have to make those decisions what you're going to do with your day, right? So that's where I decided to basically just go northwest from there to, this place, I guess Santa Barbara and all that. I mean, there's this canyon, you cross it and there's this canyon, which looks
big cable.
Yeah, it looks kind of scary. It doesn't look inviting at all, and I thought it was super high because in the middle there, right past DV0, there's a town there. I think it's Cieneguillas. Is that what it is, or something? Or No. There's a very marked town where everybody always goes out, catches the thermal, and goes back usually, right? So I just got cloud base there. I'm like, oh, I got a perfect glide to make it to the other side of this canyon or whatever. So I went there and then started hitting like massive sink, it's just going down like a freaking stone, I'm like, holy shit, this is not looking good. And I basically made it to the side of the canyon and got really low. Got parked over this little hill where I was just able to sustain for a little while, hoping I was going to get something. Didn't get anything. I was kind of starting to think, this is the end of my flight. Then I saw two buzzards or roaches, whatever, going kind of like a little deeper. And there was this one terrain I had where I could just land before actually having to dive into that canyon. And I followed them like, well, they must know what they're doing, so I'll just follow them, So I followed them, realizing that if I didn't get anything after my first turn over that field, I basically had to abandon and just land there and forget about it, right? But I did get something. I mean, it was light at first, and then I started just working it. And then I got into something, and I started drifting with the terrain, like on the terrain as it climbs. And as I started drifting a little bit, more landing options opened up, and I started feeling more comfortable about going deeper and deeper. And I just followed it, and then I got out of there. And then from there on, there were more landing options, so it wasn't that tight anymore in terms of landing out. I did know that whole area was not recommended for landing in terms of like safety and all that. I heard that afterwards. I'm like glad I didn't know that.
Ignorance is bliss, man.
Yeah, sometimes it is. So I kept pushing and just kept climbing, scratching the terrain at times and all that, because like you said earlier, it kind of, terrain goes up there before you get to that plateau and the flatlands. You eventually still kind of got parked real low, like I'm talking 30 feet over a hill, basically, in the wind, basically you have speedboat working it just to stay there. You worked it, went around it, eventually got it. And And that was my last really good climb before I actually hit the flatlands. And once I did hit the flatlands, it was like the lid came off and cloud base became real high. And it was just, I mean, I won't say it was easy because it was hard work, but it wasn't hard in terms of getting low and saves and all that. I just stayed high the whole
It's
time
pretty
and started hitting.
straightforward.
Oh, it was classic Northeastern Brazil,
Cloud
flying in
support.
terms of like clouds were working. It was just pointed to the next cloud, the straightest possible line with the wind, optimizing my speed. Climbs of like plus 7 meters per second.
Oh,
At
epic.
some point my GPS showed 125 kilometers per hour downwind speed. So that was about the fastest I've
Whoa.
ever flown. uh,
Wow. And
my only
smooth. It
concern,
wasn't bad. It was just nice. As
no,
long as you were up.
yeah, exactly. It wasn't like, scary, radically turbulent or anything. It wasn't smooth, but I mean, it was totally handleable. It was totally not scary or anything. The only thing that was scary was the idea of landing out in those conditions. So my only concern was to stay high.
Keep
But
going.
like I said, the clouds were working. It was just a matter to point it at the next cloud, and there's landing fields all over the place there. So once I hit those, once I went past Lake Victoria there, I mean, it was fast flying and it was like, high. Cloud base was super high, and there was like no concerns. I really just kept high. I don't recall being low at all for that whole, for those whole, what is it, 200 kilometers almost probably, until I started to get to the other side of the plateau, which was already then towards the end of the flight. But it took me like 2 hours to get to the beginning of the plateau, and then it probably took me like 2 hours to cross the whole plateau. It was so fast. It was fun.
We'll have the link up on X Contest to the track log because it's quite remarkable. We feel like we've gone a long way when we get to Lago Victoria. Whenever we have a task set up there, it's always a handful of people make it. It's
Right.
never a big quad. It's never that many folks pull that off because of the wind and the low, and it's a tricky flight. But when you look at yours, you have to kind of zoom out, zoom out. Zoom out. Like, holy shit, you went a
Well, I
long
think
ways. I mean, that plateau is huge.
it is, and I think it is also because I went to the west of it,
Yeah.
and also, I mean, that helped me with the airspace, which also was kind of luck because I hadn't really studied that. Like I said, I was really planning on doing that flight, so I kind of just went for it.
Yeah.
But I'd done the same sort of thing, like you said. Actually, I think it was in a competition. I don't do a lot of competitions now because I don't want to, just because of lack of time and all that. But maybe 2 years or something. Ago, there was a task that had, the goal was near Lake Victoria, and I went that way. And it's like, once you go past like near Toluca and all that, there's like two air masses there. And if you're a little bit too far to the east, it's just a sinkhole.
Yeah.
It's like a blue hole or something.
Yeah.
So, I tried that a few times and it never worked. On the left side, I was basically almost like in the foothills there for a little while until I hit the plains, and that worked just fantastically. So,
Yeah.
yeah, like always in paragliding, it's always I see it as like there's always a factor of luck involved, right? I mean,
Sure.
often it's planning. You have your plan A or plan B, but then you have to have that flexibility to kind of adjust your plans to what you're seeing is actually happening. If you're not in a competition at least, and you have that freedom to choose what you're going to do with your day. And I think I was just lucky in that I recognized that opportunity and kind of just went for it without making too many questions about it. When I was at that critical point there, DV0. It was hard work initially to get there, but then once I got there, I felt like, in my salsa, I felt at home in those conditions. So I like flying like that, I'll be honest. I think triangles are incredibly admirable. I mean, they're also very technical, maybe more technical, evidently more technical than downwind flying. But I enjoy downwinder. I just enjoy the big number. Like, I know
Yeah.
doing a triangle and it's fun. You're landing right next to your car and close to the, launch or something like that. It's very convenient. It's elegant. It's beautiful. I love it. And I'm focusing on it because I've done my share of downwinders, so my new focus is to do bigger triangles. But I still just enjoy freaking putting the gas on and going down as fast as I can.
And we don't have, typically the days aren't super long down there. It's the middle of winter. I mean, you're closer to the equator, but you're still a long ways away. So I mean, we don't have those huge long days. What did the flight end
Right.
up being lengthwise, time wise?
And time 6 hours, I believe it was something
6 hours.
like,
Yeah, I mean that's a long time.
6 hours.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever had a flight 6 hours in VIA. That's pretty good. And what put you down at the end of the day? Was it just you? Did you get the last final epic glide, or did you make a mistake?
No, no. I mean, it was the end of the day for
Yeah.
sure.
It was
That
just
was one
dying
thing.
off.
It was, well, while I was super high, the thing is I was literally running out of land, basically. That's
Oh.
what put me down. The point where I landed, there weren't too many landing places left ahead of me.
Oh.
And then the terrain steeply dropped off. It was like the end of the plateau. And I couldn't see over it. I was pretty high, but I couldn't see over it. And I had no idea if there was like, I mean, it looked like just a drop off with like some mountainous areas and then a drop off into probably the jungle or something. I don't know. I
Whoa.
have, I have no idea what was past these mountains. And the wind was blowing like stink. And I saw a big, big field, where I knew I could set up at the beginning of the field. Actually, my whole setup was like from 5 miles ahead going backwards, kind of working
Oh,
between speed
wow.
bar and ever just to kind of backwards approach in the field. Because I was evidently kind of worried about that last
Yeah.
part of the flight. It was really windy, and I landed on probably 50%, 50% speed bar or something like that, vertical, down like that, kind of working it.
Wow.
Once I got down, I killed my wing, and it was fine, but it was definitely a little bit scary. It was the most scary
Oh,
part
it
of the
would have
whole
been
flight for
scary to then
sure.
drop off the plateau and be more down in the lee and stuff. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, and I could have gotten over it if I knew it was there. If I knew there was a landing field there somewhere, I would have gone for it. But I had no clue. I hadn't even
Yeah.
prospected it. I had no clue what was there, and I wasn't going to throw myself over the edge.
What was the wind blowing when you landed?
Oh, it was honking. They must have been 35 kilometers per hour, something like
Oh,
that at
wow.
least. Like I said, I mean, my
Ripping.
approach was going backwards and I was on 50, 75, sometimes 100% bar, just working it to kind of position myself. Going backwards the right way
Man,
to
good
that
thing you
field.
stayed in the air all day. That would have been ugly to land 2 hours earlier and that kind of stuff
I
and
know,
still
I know.
ripping
Yeah,
off
yeah.
and thermic and stuff. Yeah, wow. Wow, man, well done.
Right. Thank
Uh,
you. Yeah.
Cohen, we got to rewind the clock a little bit here. You sent me an email with some really, really funny stories. When let's go back to your first. Was it your first flight, literally in Fiji?
It was. Yeah, yeah.
So you did a
I,
tandem.
I was backpacking, I finished studying. I'm originally from Belgium, I grew up and studied in Belgium, and then I just wanted to see something of the world. So I bought a backpack and a plane ticket, left for Latin America, and started just traveling, basically improvising as I went along. Um, I hadn't been exposed to paragliding up to that point. I kind of knew that it existed, but, in Belgium's flat, there's no
What year?
paragliding
Where?
much.
When was this?
This was 96, 97.
Okay. Yep.
I get into Fiji on a Pacific ticket that I got, jumping several islands there. And I meet these, French travelers, backpackers, one's traveling with this huge backpack, never seen one like that before. I'm like, what is this guy carrying along? Turns out he's got like evidently his tandem glider, two pairs of socks, two pairs of underwear, and that was about it. So I'm like, oh, wow, interesting. And he was a super cool dude, and he was a pro, professional tandem pilot in France or Switzerland or something. And so he offered like if we find a place where we can launch, I'll take you up. And I'm like, yeah, I'll hold you to that, for sure. So we were staying with this local family, this Fijian family in this bay somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Me, him, and two other guys. And we went up with the local guy, Bob, with his machete on this hill to kind of see if we could create a launch there, which we did.
Was this on the
Jumped
main
off
island?
some.
Was this on Savu Savu, or was this up on the north one?
I think it was the north one. I'd have to look at it.
Okay.
This is a long time ago. I don't remember the exact location. I know went to a couple of these islands. They're all beautiful, by the way. But yeah, so we did find this place that was, with a little bit of work, an hour of cleaning up, we were able to launch from there. So Christoph, he first took the other guy up, the English guy, tall dude. Within 15 minutes, the guy was puking and hanging lifeless in the harness like that. I'm like, okay. So then he had to do a bunch of wing overs and all that to top land and then set it down right on the hill again, because actually there was no landing. He did, I look at it back now and I'm like, that was kind of crazy. We launched from there without even knowing if there was a landing, because he assumed we were going to be able to land on the beach apart from top landing. But
Oh.
we hadn't explored the beach, so we didn't know that.
Ah.
Actually, I was concerned. I wasn't concerned. I trusted the guy
Yeah, you
blindly,
didn't
sort of.
know. You didn't know
I didn't
anything.
know. I didn't know. I didn't know anything. I'm like, he knows. So it was my turn, and we launched, we fly around for a little while, and I'm like, hey, can you do some of those wing overs? That looked like a lot of fun, we're doing the wing overs, and now all at once we're getting a little low under launch, and we're not getting back up. The wind started dying off. It was end of the afternoon, and so we're starting to glide out towards, the trees where we assumed that behind that was the beach, or evidently was the beach. And then he sees this open spot in the jungle, and it's like, we'll put it down right here. I'm like, yeah, fine, perfect landing, no problem. We pack up. By now it's 5:30, almost 6 p.m. It's
Oh,
starting to
it's
get dark.
dark. I mean, Fiji gets dark at 6. Yeah.
Yeah, as the crow flies, we were probably, half a mile or a mile away from the place where, the family, the hut was where we were staying at. But we had to cross this hill or mountain, whatever, and then kind of go over it and then, turn the other way to go back there, which seemed pretty straightforward. So we packed up and started hiking up that hill, but in 30 minutes was, totally dark. It was like 85 degrees, humid, like we had no water, nothing to eat or anything. The only thing we had was he was smoking cigarettes, so he had some cigarettes and like 6 matches or something. That was the only thing we had in that big backpack. So we're sweating, we're hauling up this backpack, changing around, he's carrying it, I'm carrying it, after like 2 or 3 hours of not getting anywhere and then freaking tripping over stuff and all that. We're like, let's just sit down and just like, smoking a cigarette. We're sitting around. All right, let's go. And he's like, all right, let's go. And he started going in this direction. I'm like, dude, we came from this direction. We need to go this direction. I'm like, no, let's just go that direction then. All right. So,
Split the difference.
another 2, 3 hours of freaking, climb and slide and whatever in the middle of the night and touching, slimy animals on tree bark and all that. It was like a mess, but, I don't mind such adventures, as long as we're not in any danger or anything. We didn't feel like we were in any danger. And he was also kind of an optimistic guy, just laughing with the situation. At some point, we're seeing fire, like just briefly, just like some fire. We're like, and then we didn't see it anymore. Like, oh man, we must be like hallucinating. We're probably like becoming dehydrated or something because we've been hiking for 5 hours with nothing to drink in this heat. That was just weird. We kept it up for like another hour, go through like bamboo forest. Eventually we decided it was maybe a better idea to go back down to the beach and then try to like swim or walk on the beach or whatever. Well, there was no beach. There was only mangroves, so we thought maybe there's only a little bit of mangroves. We'll try to climb through them and then swim or whatever. Like we were climbing through these mangroves half an hour in, it's like light one of these matches, man. Let's have a look if there's actually an end to this. We looked in anywhere around us, there's like mangroves, like we were in this natural prison or something. It's like, oh no, we're never going to get out of here. So we went back and eventually decided to just open the paraglider and sleep in it right there in the jungle. So fine.
I love that you did a bivvy on your first paragliding flight ever. Bivvied in the wing. I mean, it's that's old
and
school.
Honestly, that totally set the tone for the rest of my adventures, as you will get to know. But anyway, this guy definitely influenced me in a wrong way as far as making the right decisions about certain things sometimes. But anyway, so the next morning, it was easy to find a way back once we had daylight. We started hiking up the hill back, and there comes our friends, all totally worried. They almost were at the point of calling the Coast Guard because they thought we'd crash, and we didn't know where we were at or if we were safe. We're like, no, we're good, and we're looking, and there's like smoke coming off the side of the hill. The freaking half of the hill is burned down. And we're like, what happened? Well, these guys, they went looking for us at night, and the Fijian guy, he pulled up these branches or whatever from palm trees and lit them up just for natural torches, for light, and stuff must have fallen off and lit up the forest, and it burned literally down as half a mountain,
Oh my
We're like,
God.
holy shit. So yeah, we were actually, thinking about that. That was scary in terms of like, if we were sleeping there, we could have been surrounded by fire or something.
Yeah.
We could have been enclosed, afterwards. In hindsight, it was like, whoa, that was kind of not such a safe situation, honestly, but it was a good adventure and a good story to tell.
Yeah,
So
totally.
So that was my introduction to paragliding, and honestly, from the second my feet lifted off the ground, I knew I had found my thing. I've tried a lot of things before. I've always loved a lot of things, to experiment different things and sports and all that. But that one, I had zero doubts that was going to be my main thing for the rest of my life, pretty much, and it has been.
Awesome. Okay, so cool. You have this wild experience in paragliding, and you don't die, so you decide this is great. What do you do then?
Well, then I went back to Belgium after, I finished my traveling, another 6 months of, or a couple of months more of traveling. No, actually, sorry. During the same trip, I ended up in India on the coast in Goa.
Yeah.
And I saw that, well, actually, I was in New Delhi and in a youth hostel. I saw this ad, learn to paraglide for $100 on the coast of Goa. I'm like, well, that sounds like a good proposal. So I went there. And I'm talking,
was that Jim Mallinson and John Sylvester and those guys? Were they were there?
No, those guys were up in the mountains. This was on the coast. This was on
but they
Goa.
did a bunch of stuff in Goa. Jim Mallinson would spend time out there. I bet you guys crossed paths and didn't even know it.
There were two instructors there. One was a Swiss guy. Guy was the English guy, and then I don't recall the other guy's name. He was one was English, the other one was Swiss, and they had like their little school there. And I had 2 days of ground training on the beach, and then 10 hops off this, I don't know, 200 foot high dune or whatever, where basically it was still, that was the early days of paragliding, where if you kind of had the glider more or less above your head, they kind of like just push you up the hill. That was how it went. And, it was basically just flying off, approaches on the radio, left, right, boom, flare, and done, right? So, and I walk away from there with my pilot's license, from Western India Paragliding Association, valid for 1 year. I'm like, I got it in the pocket. I'm a pilot
I'm
now.
legit.
I'm legit, exactly. So I was totally stoked, Finished my traveling, went back to Belgium with my license in my hand, and it so happened that a friend of mine had this old glider that I don't know where he got it, but it turned out to be this LDK. Remember that brand, LDK? It's like a French brand or something, which was like literally mattresses. It almost looks like a parachute, basically.
Yeah.
In these bright, day glue colors and all that. Thing is, there was no serial tag on it. There was no identification weight-wise or anything on that glider. It was like a prototype or something. And worst of all, it had.
It's like buying a glider off eBay back in the day. I mean, eBay didn't exist back then, but sweet.
Pretty much, he just like gave it to me. It's like, you can use this one. I'm like, great, I'm ready for Latin America. I'm ready for the Andes with this thing. So the thing is, the glider had this. I mean, it was kind of ahead of its time because, like I said, it was a prototype, and it had this like rod in the leading edge. Only that now the rods, run like this. At that time, there were two rods open, keeping the leading edge open, like sort of like that, over the span of the whole wing.
Yeah,
it was a bitch to get that folded up and get it in the backpack and all that. I'm like, man, I'm just gonna cut that out. I thought somebody like retrofitted that in there, out of insecurity or something. I'm like, that's bullshit. I'm just gonna cut that out. Took the rods out. Not a good idea. So I actually took that glider to the Pyrenees with a friend and flew it. It was raining. I even flew it in the rain. I don't know how that thing kept open, partly because there was no turbulence, but did a couple of sled rides with it. And then next, I wasn't done yet with traveling. So after a couple of months of working and saving up some money, I went back to Latin America, and spent, with the idea of doing some flying in Colombia and Ecuador. And also I'd met my girlfriend at the time, which then became my wife. She's Colombian. So I kind of tried to combine both things, becoming a pilot and, becoming a boyfriend, which didn't go that well together in hindsight. But, but so here I am. And
oil and water.
Sort of, yeah. It was difficult in many ways, but so I ended up chasing the weather in Colombia. Just ended up in the wrong places at the wrong time with rain, getting frustrated, So let's go to Cali. All right, Cali. Piedichincha was at the time the big site, and a great place. I hiked up that mountain like 20
times. And now what year are we?
This is 98.
Oh, you're still early. Okay, so it's fully happening there even then, and I didn't know that.
Well, there was not that much going on yet. Like Roldanilla, I don't know if Roldanilla was already a thing at that time, but Piedichincha was definitely. I mean, it was mostly locals. I can't remember seeing any foreigners there, but the locals had their club going, and hang gliders were still there and all that, and it was good conditions. The thing is, the first so many flights, there was no thermals or nothing. It was just kind of like sled rides, and I would just never make the LZ. My glider didn't have a good glide ratio, and I would always have to land in this dry river. People are like, why don't you land in the LZ? I'm like, I don't know. I just can't make it there, So anyway, so this one day there was finally some thermal activity, which I didn't know how to recognize that, except for that my glider folded up in the air. So that was my indication of turbulence, So, and the worst thing of all is I thought I didn't have money for a reserve parachute. So I was flying without a reserve parachute also, which is,
of course you were.
So I'm flying straight out. I'm not literally doing anything. And all at once the freaking glider collapses like 80%. And I'm like, immediately starting to, like one turn, two turn around, and it opens back up. I'm like, holy crap, what was that? So I'm like, I was going to go to land anyway. That was my flight plan anyway. So I'll keep flying. The same thing happens again. It collapses a second time and freaking reopens by itself. And I managed to safely land and all that. The locals, are you crazy? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I don't know. They kited the glider and they noticed that the leading edge had like this point to it, which without those rods were like the basic component of the safety of that glider. It was clearly not meant to be flown without those rods. So yeah, and that's where the girlfriend thing didn't work out, because that was the first time my girlfriend, Monica, actually joined me on the hill, and she saw me dropping out of the sky. People were like, "Call an ambulance! This guy's gonna die!" This and that. So it was not a good experience for her to,
Whoa.
And I understand. Ever since, she's not been a great fan of flying, and that's been a problem for sure.
Are you guys still together?
No.
Oh, I was gonna
Well,
say,
we've been together for 25 years, and we ended up deciding that we'd better split our ways. We've done that
just
in peace
recently.
and good harmony just recently, beginning of this year, actually. And it was not because of paragliding. I mean, I'm sure paragliding has not helped,
Right.
but it's just a personality thing. It's unrelated, It's just butt
But
heads
that's
all the time.
amazing. I mean, she saw you damn near kill yourself and stuck with you for
And,
all these years. She's
well, and unfortunately, that was only the first time of two times that happened, Then, anyway, like, evidently discarded that glider, got myself a what was it, an air design? No, a flight design. Remember the flight design?
yeah,
It was probably also pretty rotten, I eventually ended up flying it in Crucita, in Crucita, in Ecuador, on the coast. And at the end, it was so porous that I would pull big ears, then it would automatically go in a parachutal, It was like it wouldn't fly anymore. So I had to get rid of that glider also. So at 90 hours of flying, I actually ended up changing to like a DHV 2-3 glider at the time, which would be like
yeah, END.
like an END right now, which was also a very stupid move at the time. I mean, I loved the glider, had a great time with it and all that until things didn't go that great, which inevitably happens when you fly a glider over your level, right? Still hadn't had the smart idea of buying a reserve. I was still trusting things were going to go good without a reserve. So now I'm back in Europe, my wife's with me again, we're in the Vosges, the Vosges, the
Yeah.
mountains in the northern part of France, which are the closest mountain to Belgium. And it's an excellent day. I wasn't really into XC yet at the time. I was just into maximizing airtime. So I didn't want to go XC because the risk of bombing out was too big. And as I didn't get much airtime, I just wanted to have hours and hours of flying. Not distance didn't interest me much at the time.
Mm.
So I'm thinking high. I'd been flying for 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever. I'm like, I got to go land, but I got 6,000 feet to work with. Let's do something here. Let's try something. So I started doing like the biggest wing overs I'd ever done before. And one of them, I just wave shifted wrong or wrong input and my whole inside of the wing collapsed. And before long, the glider was all around me, all over the place, left, right, boom, I'm trying to control it. The more I do, the worse it gets. Fortunately, I never got twisted around or anything, but I pretty much dropped, I'd say like probably 4,000 meters out of the sky
Jeez.
before it opened up. And I'm not going to take credit for that because the glider did it by itself,
Right.
But
You
same
finally stopped
situation,
messing with it and it straightened itself out.
Probably there was probably just 5 seconds I didn't do anything and it started flying again. But yeah, same thing. I landed and my wife saw it happen. She came at me and I think she slapped me in the face or something. So she was like just because she's like what the
What
hell?
are you doing?
Yeah,
Stop
and
trying
then
to kill yourself.
well, then I had to make two promises, and I mean by then I'd learned my lesson. Then first thing I did was buy a reserve right away. That was a smart decision, of course. The stupidest thing I'd ever done was to fly without a reserve. Very stupid. And then I did an SIV shortly after also, which was also, that took me to the next level. And I mean, SIVs, I've always been a huge, proponent of them. I think actually they should be mandatory for anything like P3 and up or at least P4 because,
Yeah.
I mean,
for
you
sure.
don't know what kind of, I see all these people flying two liners, even C's, that, I mean, I'm not judging anybody's skill level or anything, but, you don't know what you have until things go wrong,
Yeah.
in terms of a glider, and I've experienced that in a few situations where, anybody can fly even a competition glider in the right condition. I mean, people do it in Holland on the coast, people with no experiences are flying Enzos on the dunes and it's all fine because nothing happens. But when that thing goes out of control, that's when you know what you got in your hands, and that's also when you're starting to get, confronted with your lack of skills if you don't have the proper, skills to handle a situation like that. So,
Yeah, it can
those were,
go sideways quick on those high aspect wings for sure. I mean, I think also SIV instruction has gotten so good. It's not cowboy anymore. It's really,
right.
there's great instructors. There's different instructors out there and different approaches, but I think for the most part, those who are doing it are doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think you can call yourself a serious pilot if at some point, the earlier the better, and multiple times you don't choose to do an SIV. You can say, oh, it's a bunch of money, this and that. Well, dying or hurting yourself is even more money, so it's not a money thing. It should be a basic requirement. Some people are like, oh, I don't need to do an SIV, I think that's fear talking, people are scared of doing full stalls. They're scared of stuff. And it's logical. It's not the first time you do them. It's not a fun sensation to feel your wing fall backwards or you fall backwards and everything goes to crap and maybe you get twisted around, this and that. But, you're flying a glider that can collapse. If you don't know what's going to happen and it's going to happen sooner or later, unless you choose to fly only in evening conditions or this or that. And there's people that do that and that's fine. But still, even then, you don't know when something's going to happen where all at once some evening wind picks up or the wind shifts and now you're in a turbulent zone or you get pushed back or,
I
there's
mean,
always
it's
something that can happen.
inevitable if you're gonna fly.
Right.
If you fly at sea, it's inevitable you're gonna get into a place that you don't want to
Right.
be. It's not if, it's when. Well, before we move on to the jail stuff and towing and private property, because that's a great story too, or even just
Mm.
before we move on, your approach early on mirrors many in that, in that era. There wasn't a ton of instruction. There wasn't a ton, but it sounded like, your kind of auto approach or independent approach, solo approach. Obviously that's personality driven, but was it more personality or ego, or was it just lack of resources?
It was, I would say that mostly a lack of resources and also just situational. I mean, I'd spend all my money on traveling and then I'd spend all my money on that, flight design and the other guy. I wasn't, I didn't have an excess of money at the time. And also there was just not that much, like most of my flying has been always in Latin America, and Latin America was, if you talk about cowboy land, I mean, there was no controls or no, there was hardly anything going on, no schools or anything. So I just kind of went with the flow and, took my opportunities as they came along, just learning as I went along, not because I didn't want any instruction, but just because, I wasn't in France or Switzerland or where the schools
Yeah.
are, this and that. I didn't have the money to pay, 1,500 euros or something for a week long course or something. Which honestly, if I did everything all over again, I would do several things differently. I would definitely, buy reserve right at once. Don't go to END glider after 90 hours of flying. That was also not a smart move, and just instruction is good. Instruction, I mean, it's worth working even if you don't have the money. Save up instead of buying that new wing. Get an SIV or an instruction course. Because I mean, I feel the same thing right now. I've always liked acro also. I'm 50-50 between. I mean, right now I'm more 75 XC, 25 acro. As I get older, I'm not having those great goals anymore in acro, but I love acro and also as a means to stay current in terms of skills. Um, but my acro, I mean, I've done one acro introduction course, maybe 2013 or something with Denlo O'Connor out west somewhere.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
was great. I learned a bunch, but all the rest I've learned by myself. And like, I've been trying to learn the infinite tumble for the last 3 years or something. And I'm stuck. Like, I don't get certain past point. Part of it is fear, but the fear is also not fear, but just the fact that I know that I don't feel like I have the actual technique. I don't have all the building blocks. Sometimes I have a tendency, and that's not personality, to run when I can't even walk yet, and and in acro, especially in all disciplines, but especially in acro, if you do that, you're not helping your progress. I have another friend in our tow club who's got the opportunity, more time and resources to actually do like a full month of, coaching in Turkey twice a year. I mean, his progress, I mean, when we started together, he was just doing like sets and whatever. Now he's actually nailed the infinite and all that. So he's
Mm.
way gone past me, in terms of skills because he's like persistent and very meticulous and just repeating the same thing over and over and over again until he's got it clear. And then he moves on to the next thing.
Mm.
I'm like, I've done stuff where I don't even know how I did it, like this joker corked, whatever, I'm feeling intuition. I'm going in this, asymmetric
Pull.
or rhythmic set. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to do an opposite. This is going to work. And I'm like, just pulling on the other side. And my glider, there's a helico underneath me. I'm like, and then afterwards I had to look up what kind of maneuver that was because I didn't know what I did, stuff like that. So, yeah, I kissed my glider a few times in the air and stuff like that. And I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, it's my style, but I think you can advance much quicker and safer with proper coaching. That would be my
Sure.
lesson, learned, out of all this.
Yeah, of course. Uh, so what brought you to the States? What is your work, by the way? What do you do?
I'm in sales. I'm a sales guy, so I'm a traveling sales guy. And that's what brought me to the States. I was working for a company in Belgium. I was doing export sales to Latin America. So I got the job. I actually studied law. And then when I finished law, I realized I didn't want to do law the rest of my life. I like traveling. I'm good with languages. So I figured, well, sales will take me traveling.
Hmm.
They can pay my tickets to go flying in different places. That sounds like a good setup. So I got into sales and I actually liked it because I do like to deal with people. I love languages. I love culture. I love traveling. And I love Latin America. And there's flying places all over the continent. So
Hmm.
that helped also in terms of keeping me motivated after all these years. So, in '01, the company I worked for at the time, had a merger with another company, and we had like some headquarters here in Charlotte, near Charlotte in North Carolina, which is why I moved here, just to be closer to my market in Latin America, the same time zone and all that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I hadn't planned on that. I was always dreaming of moving to Brazil or Mexico or someplace, and I kind of thought this was going to be like a stopover, short stopover, and then move on further south. But that didn't happen for several reasons. We ended up having kids, and then once you have kids, you gotta not think about yourself just anymore, but about the consequences and of living in Brazil or Mexico, and trying to provide the best environment for them to grow up. So we ended up staying here, and it's been great. It's been 24 years now that we live in the Carolinas, and
Oh, really?
apart from the
Well, you've been there a long time.
apart from the flying, which is really frustrating around here, it's a good place, a healthy place to live, and grow up,
Yeah, I've
grow a
heard
family.
Charlotte's a great town. It's a
hmm
fantastic place. Good food. What's the towing you set up there? And then how did you have some run-ins with the law?
Well, those are two different. Well, actually, yeah. So the run-ins with the law came from the fact that there's just not a lot of flying places around here in the Carolinas, and it's always very delicate. We actually just happened to lose three sites over the past year.
Mm.
One of them, my most frequented site, so that's been extremely frustrating. But it's always been like that, it's always been hard. It's always private, property where you have to have permission. And even then it's hard to keep it once you have it. So I've always been, surfing Google Earth, trying to figure out if there was any other places we could go explore and fly. I spent a lot of years putting a lot of energy and time in both, exploring my laptop and then going out and checking these places out and, pretty much banditoing off of those sites. I've got a whole list of sites that I've,
Those were in
tried
air
out
quotes,
like
folks
that.
that are listening. Sites with air quotes.
Right? Yeah, yeah. So that actually did create a couple of problems here and there. One was where I discovered this place in Tryon, North Carolina. And there's a beautiful grass field that I found that was perfectly launchable in the perfect wind direction. I was so stoked I couldn't contain myself. I just went there and launched off of it and had an excellent flight and then went back and did that like, I don't know, 5 times and had like a 80, 90 kilometer cross country flight. Never had a sled ride. It was always right on.
Mm.
So I started to get so excited that I contacted those people, homeowners associations. There's like three of them involved in the same mountain. I didn't know how complicated they were at the time yet, so I thought they would share my enthusiasm about how great this place is for flying. So I sent them a letter like, "Hey, this place is like magic. For flying would be fantastic. We can fly the records here and do tandem flights and this and that." They're like, "No, thank you." They sent me a letter with their lawyer, basically telling me I was not welcome and please do not come back.
Wow. Weird.
Because yeah, so I mean, either way I would have approached it. There was no way we would have gotten access there anyway. But I still felt I was absolutely certain that a North Carolina record could have been flown from there, would be flown from there. So I had that in the back of my mind, and I was on the lookout for a good day with a good forecast to give that one last shot. Even after getting that letter, I'm a little bit persistent sometimes maybe in a inappropriate way, I would even admit. But and I had made contact with a guy who had like a house that was kind of abandoned and in bad shape right on top of the ridge. I didn't have the money to buy such a house, but I maintained a conversation just in case he was ever going to sell it or something. So I hiked, I rode up with my car, dropped my stuff up in his backyard, then drove back down, hiked up the mountain so I would not leave my car inside or anything like that. Put my gear together, in the woods basically, and then waited long. And I thought I would wait long enough to not risk sinking out and launching too early. But the problem is it's a bit of a cliff launch. So I waited too long and the conditions turned on too strong. And now the place right on the road, which is technically public land, where I was hoping to launch from, was not launchable. It was turbulent. It was rotor. And I couldn't get my glider up. So I had to go on the grass field, which is, the private property, the HOA.
Yeah.
And even then I couldn't get my glider up. It was bad cycles. It was turbulent. I mean, I tried a couple of times. I went to crap. And by then I've been there for 15, 20 minutes. And now a guy pulls up right in front of me on the road where I had to run over and cross in order to get airborne. And I first thought he was just going to look at me and thought it was pretty cool. But when I actually started running and to try to launch, he drove his car right in front of me. So I had to stop. And then he's like, "Stop, hold it. I've called the cops. You're trespassing again. We told you not to and this and that." So effectively before long, a couple of, police vehicles came up and soon enough, there was like 15 police around me, all this and that. And
Whoa.
they even handcuffed me and then took me down. And then, And then, this was this little jail, literally is like, 10 feet by 10 feet. It literally is like from a movie or something, this little town in the middle of nowhere. And I get
Whoa.
literally handcuffed to the bench. I don't know what they thought the risk was. I was going to run away or fly away from there or something. So they had me. But I mean, they were like, yeah, these people on the hill there, they're kind of like, they've been there forever and they don't want nobody to come in there and mess with them and this and that. And they were very sympathetic to me. But I did have to show up in court for that one and pay a fine for trespassing, and that was the first time. That was not the first time that I got convicted for trespassing. Once was with Greenpeace that I did like an anti carbon. They were building Duke Energy here was going to build another carbon fueled electricity plant, and I joined some people to protest against that. We literally crossed the line, the property line of Duke Energy's headquarters in order to hand over a letter asking them not to, and this and that. And I got, I basically also got arrested that night for that. And then there
Oh,
was
good for
another
you. I like that
situation.
one. That's a good one.
Yeah, I've had my years of, and I'm still
Activism.
trying to, yeah. But there's another situation. So that was number two. But in between, there was yet another one. And then we're getting back to the towing. Because now I found this lake, like an hour south from my house in South Carolina, and it looked like perfect. There's huge grass field. I'm like, man, somebody built this for paragliding. It's fantastic. Let's go try it out. I convinced my buddies to go on a Sunday morning when I assumed everybody was in church and there would be no one there. We didn't read any of this fine print or anything around that lake. There was a couple of signs up where it's like, let's just not read that and just go for it. I don't know why my friends always follow me, but they did. And one guy was the owner of the boat and
Because of
all
the
that. And,
stoke, man. I'd
yeah,
follow you
exactly.
too. He is fired up. We got to go see what
Yeah.
happens.
Well, exactly. And it was fantastic. I mean, so that was me, Dimitri, and his wife, just the three of us. Dimitri's the owner of the boat, and his wife's also a pilot. And so I did one flight, and it was magic. It was epic. I mean, I got high, threw a bunch of acro, landed right there. Let's do another one. All right. And then the third one, we already started kind of intuitively feeling like we were pushing it, but I'm like, man, it's just so perfect. Let's do one more. We should have just gotten out of there. But anyway, I did one more. And by the time I landed, some guy came up with a pickup truck. He said, dude, I'm just warning you, but the cops are on their way and security's on their way. You're in trouble. So I don't know why he said that because there was no time to get away anyway. Uh, Within 5 minutes, effectively, the local security was there with like an AK-47 or whatever, and I was going to be friendly, took my helmet off. Hey, wanted to give a hand. Like, whoa, 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 stay there, don't move. They didn't even allow me to fold my glide or anything. Like, wait, the
Whoa.
sheriff's on their way. So, police department's on their way. You guys are trespassing. This is a nuclear plant right here. This is off limits. You guys can't be here. This and that. Like, oh, we didn't know that. Actually, the worst part of all was that my bailout, in case a line would break or something, was actually right next to this nuclear plant. Like, if I would have had a line break, I would have gone like and landed right near this nuclear plant, which they might have shot me out of the air. Probably, I don't know, because I
Whoa.
mean, they had one nuclear reactor and there was a second one in construction. And I
Whoa.
had a GoPro on my helmet, so
Was the lake
turns
being
out
used for cooling or something?
exactly it's a cooling lake. Yeah, so there was actually no boating allowed on that lake. So yeah, so that was, and then meanwhile, my buddy Dimitri, who was still in the boat waiting, he came up and like, Koen, is everything okay? And then the other guy, you two, stop, stay there, wait. So now he's also involved in legal problems. Before long, there's like a couple of police vehicles come up. There's like 30 police officers around, this and that. The Department of Natural Resources is there. The security from the plant is there. I mean, there's like 50 people around us. And it's like, and I had the GoPro, so, they must have looked up my record and saw, my protesting with Greenpeace. So they're like, this guy is probably like an eco-terrorist or something, maybe or they thought we were spies or
Oh,
something.
man. That didn't
Yeah.
help.
So,
Yeah.
so they confiscated my GoPro and this and that. And then we had to go to court for that one too, which was actually real funny because, again, a little small town in the middle of nowhere in South Carolina, backdoor negotiating basic, because, we're there and the judge or the police officer, I can't remember what it was, he's like, all right, well, that's going to be like $400 each or something. I'm like, what? Dude, you said if we showed up in person that it was going to be a small fine, and that's not a small fine, man. I mean, so, well, he's like, well, just wait a minute. And he went back in the back office and talks with another guy or something and then comes back. He's like, how about $130? Does that work for you guys? I'm like, yeah, we'll take that. So he negotiated our fine there, which was kind of unusual. That was kind of funny. But we got off with $130,
Do you get,
fine
does
each.
that go on your record? Is it what, trespassing or what'd you get nailed with?
Man, I got more records than the CIA. Uh, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think the other one went on my record because that was a second degree trespassing, the one of the mountaintop,
Yeah.
that one, because I got a formal warning is why it was,
I didn't know there was
second degree.
degrees in trespassing. Wow.
Yeah. No, I'm formally a serial trespasser now. So, but ever since I've kind of stepped away from exploring places where I'm not supposed to be, I've kind of had my share of that. I'll leave it to someone else, to the newer generation, But the funniest thing of all is, like I said, I can be pretty persistent, and my friends can be pretty crazy in following me because, when we were there, the guys of the the Department of Natural Resources, I asked them, like, look, you understand this part of the lake here is like the cooling area and the nuclear plant and this and that, but I've scouted some other areas on the opposite side of the lake. Like, if we go there, would that be fine? And these guys were like, yeah, as long as you don't come on this side of the lake, you're all right.
Oh.
And so I convinced Dimitri and some other local pilot, to come with me some other Sunday after that court was settled and all that. And somehow they decided to come with me, and we were really efficient in putting the boat in the water within, again, Sunday morning, we were there, we dropped the boat off, within 15 minutes, we were like, putting along on the water. And all at once this other boat comes at us, and some guy goes like, Koen? I'm like, yeah. Oh, some guy in a suit, I'm like, in a suit on a boat on a Sunday morning waiting for me. This is really strange. So he was he was like, I don't know, an undercover police or whatever. And he's like, dude, I thought we were clear last time we talked. I'm like, yeah, but the DNS guy said this and that. No, DNS guy don't matter. We told you not to come back here, and you're not welcome. You guys need to leave. So I think they've been monitoring my phone messages or something, because they were there when we got in the water. I mean, they couldn't have not gotten there after us and gotten in the water and intercepted us halfway, when we were going out. So they must have, have been, yeah. So I was on the radar there for a little while. I hope I'm not anymore, but I don't do stupid stuff like that anymore.
Well, now you're over 50. You gotta rein it in a little bit. Before we move on, I'm going to ask you about your two goals before you turn 50. But that reminds me of when I was first learning. I got my license from Santa out at the point. Chris Santa Croce, who's been on the show, and everybody on this side of the pond knows about Santa, but he used to do these towing fly-in / SIV clinics, but also kind of what would they be called? Event expos deals up in on Sammamish Lake up by Tiger, big launch for us up in Washington. And he was driving his boat from Utah up to Washington, and I was living in Hood River at the time with my girlfriend Jody, and he was just driving through. And I mean, I was a 15-hour pilot. I was brand new, and he had given me his DVD or CD or whatever it was back then to watch the SIV. So I had watched how to do SIV, but I had never done any SIV. And he calls me up. Hey, I'm driving through the gorge. You want to do some bro tows down on the Columbia River? So that's the event site for kite surfing and windsurfing. It's right there in Hood River. It's where everybody kite surfs. And so, yeah, that sounds awesome. So Jody and I jump in the car. We go down to the parking lot and we meet him, and he's already got the boat set up. He does all the towing by himself, so he's got the boat, and the boat's, in neutral, engines on. He's got he's up on at the event site, which is this grass site. It's perfect for towing. You're going to tow out on the river, so it's not a lake, but the river, it's Columbia River. It's pretty big. And, I mean, I'm shaking in my boots. I haven't gotten any kind of an intro, or he's just, here. Hooks me up, and you've seen the video? Yeah, okay, let's go. And just as he's going back to the boat, it wasn't a cop, it was kind of a security guard kind of guy. He comes down and he goes, hey, you can't do that here. And Santa goes, what are we doing? The guy goes, well, I don't know, but you can't do it. And Santa could just tell. He didn't actually know. The guy didn't know what we were doing, but he was just saying no. And so Santa goes, well, we're going to do it because you don't even know what we're doing. So he runs back to the boat and just starts speeding away. And I'm standing there in the forward position. I literally don't know. He does. I mean, I think he did have me on radio. He did have me but he's driving the boat. There's not somebody else sitting there. And I'm looking at Jody, who's standing right next to me going, what do I do? And she goes, I don't know. And as soon as it starts the tensioning up, she goes, run. And so I start running and get up in the air and I'm figuring it out. And now he's got me on radio, follow the boat and doing all the thing. But because we're on a river, he's got to do some turns. And so he's instructing me and I'm kind of getting it. And I come off tow and I start doing stuff, asymmetric collapse and frontal, and he's guiding me through all these things. And now I'm starting to get pretty low, and he comes on the radio and he goes, "Hey, so you might see that there's a whole bunch of cop cars back where we took off." And I'd seen all these cop with the sirens going, just one after another, yeah, so go find somewhere else to land. I'm out of here. Wait, what? And he just speeds off up the river and, now what do I do? And so instead of landing at the event site, I go land at the parking lot at McDonald's, and I'm on the radio with Jody the whole time. And, "Hey, come over to the McDonald's, pick me up." And she picks me up and we hightail it out of there. I mean, it felt like we were base jumping off something in Vegas, and we got a ditch. I mean, that was my first SIV experience ever. It was so awesome. It was so amazing. You see all those cops, go somewhere else. I'm out of here.
Well, sometimes, like they say in Mexico, sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Exactly. Because you're never going to get the permission. Sometimes you just have to do it, right?
Exactly. Oh man, it was so fun. I just thought, man, you are such a stud. What is it? Yeah, what are we doing? It was the perfect answer.
Yeah,
You knew the guy had no idea. Okay, so you and I are the same age. A couple years ago, you set a couple goals for your 50th. What was that all about?
Yeah. So, since maybe 2012, 13 or something, I've been starting to go to northeastern Brazil because I did get eventually fascinated by, long distance flying, and that was evidently the place to be. It was actually also kind of crazy because the first time I went there, then my best flight was like 120 or 130 kilometer flight or something. And I went to Kishida, must have been 2013 or something like that, or 14 maybe. And, so same thing. I hadn't really informed myself too well. I was pretty good at ground handling and I was pretty confident of my launching skills and all that. I got there by myself, midday conditions. The first day I arrived, I'm like, I'm just going to go to the launch with my rental car and see how conditions are. There was nobody there. I'm like, it's pretty strong, but it looks perfect. Cumulus all over the place. I'm like, I'm just going to launch. So I launched, wild launch, but all safe and all good. And I get up and sky out and now I'm flying like, I don't know, 40, 50 kilometers until I decide to land, just to not make it too far because I didn't know where I was going or anything. And I had a retrieve driver hired for the next day. So it was just like a warm-up round. But I fell in love with the Sertão from then, like right away. I mean, the people, just the incredible potential for flying, the conditions. I love strong, rowdy conditions. As long as you go up and far, it's all good for me. So I had a couple of good flights, made my first 200 plus, I don't know how much, 240 kilometer flight or something on that trip, double my previous distance, and then I think I've gone back like every year since, except for the last 2 years or something,
Really? Wow.
And each time I went, I've improved my personal best, from 240, it went to 320 and 360 and 380. Until evidently, once you start getting into that game, you started to realize if you can fly 300, you can fly 400. It's just a matter of, planning your day a little better, launching a little earlier, flying a little faster, stuff like that. So my goal, one of the two goals I had before I turned 50, it was to fly 400 kilometers, which I thought was now 400, it's not that special anymore. People fly, they're hitting 600 now. So 400 is it's still sort of a select club. 300 is not a reference anymore. You don't want to even mention it to anybody, 300 is nothing unless it's a triangle. But 400, I mean, and people go like, oh, it's downwind flying. It's got to be easy. But northeastern Brazil is not easy at all. It's very hard for multiple reasons. First of all, because you launch super early, evidently because you want to take every possible flying hour of the day to maximize your potential distance. But that also means in the morning the thermals are still light. There's a lot of wind. The thermals are blown apart. You're not getting real high. The terrain's unforgiving. You've got a couple of places where, I mean, I don't know. You've flown in the Sertão. I'm not sure which places you've been.
Tesima is the only place I've really. I finally got out of Tesima, and it's just vicious, man. It's so tough. But
Tesima's the hardest of all.
Flew to Kishida, which was almost 400. It wasn't 400. It was 380 or something. But that put me at Kishida, and so the rest of the trip I just stayed at Kishida because it was so much easier. Right. But I mean, Tesima's brutal. God, it's horrible.
I got a similar story. I flew from Tesima once also, and Actually, I went there twice because the first time I didn't get one nice flight at all. It was cross conditions and, like you say, super low. And I mean, 80 was the best I did on my first trip to Tsushima. And then you
Tsushima
have to sit
so
around for
hard.
multiple days because it's blown out, you know.
And a
And
hard place to
it's
sit around. I don't know what it's like now. I was
yeah,
down there with the guys. I was by myself, but I was with Saladini was there and Nascimento,
uh,
and they had broken the record the year before. This was before they started towing at Tsushima. It was still just purely foot
what year was
launch.
that?
That was 2016, I think. So he set the record. Didn't he do it? I mean, a number of records, but the big one was 2016. So I think I was down there in 2017. And
Okay,
I had showed up by myself, and those guys were there, and they had said, last year we were here for 37 days and we got the one record. And I mean, by a week in, I mean, the forecasting is ridiculous. There isn't any. And so
right.
you go
No,
out there at sun up or before sun up every day, and 9 days out of 10, I was back at the hotel by 8.
yeah, yeah.
Either we
Blown out.
couldn't launch because it was way too strong, or you'd fly 5K and bomb out, because you have to go over that plateau that's 40K
Yeah, yeah.
and it's hot. And then Nascimento hit a fence and screwed up his arm. And they were only there a few days, and they just said, we can't handle it this year. We're going home. But I mean, I'd be there at 8 o'clock and there was no internet. There's no AC. There's nothing to do. The food sucks. And you're just sitting there all day. I mean, it was a job. It was work. It was tough.
It'll drive you to drinking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there was a lot
No,
of drinking
it's
before
not
noon.
that fun of a place. But I was lucky the next time I went back to the Seaman because that was shortly after that big flight that these guys did. I'm like, I got to try this again. And I actually got there, and the next day it was on. The conditions were great, and I managed to do like a 280-kilometer flight or something. Not huge, but I mean, I went past Batu.
Okay.
And then what I decided to do is I spent the night in Batu and launched the next morning from Batu, and then broke my personal record and that was actually the site record at the time with a 382, I believe, kilometer flight,
I remember
which
watching you
actually
do that.
reopened. They reopened Batu as a potential site because I don't know if you know, but they created like this artificial lake,
Yeah.
like I don't know, maybe 100 kilometers north of Batu, and that kind of shut down the area for a while. But I guess this lake was now way more down the water level or so, or smaller or something. And I kind of, after I went and broke that site record, everybody started going back to Patu, like seeing the potential again. They kind of thought Patu was done. And then, because Kishada is a pain in the ass to launch also. To see him, forget it. I mean, not only the conditions are real difficult to nail a good day, but then the launch is also brutal,
It's
and
brutal.
dangerous. Kishada is also dangerous. Patu is also dangerous, but like of the three, I think Patu is the most. Have you flown in Patu?
I've never flown Patu. No.
I think it's the most enjoyable town to stay in, and it's also the best launch of the three.
Mm.
And then the next day, so I flew 380 something all the way to like the border of Ceará and Piauí, and then spent the night in Quixadá. And then the third day, I flew from Quixadá and did another like 300-kilometer flight. So I basically flew 27 hours in 3 consecutive days and
Jeez.
925 kilometers. So then I was toast, Then I was finally tired after 3 days like that. But yeah, I've been going back for year after year, and always and then the next step evidently was the 400 kilometers, which I've probably done between 15 and 20 flights of over 300 kilometers over these years, always trying to hit the 400, and it would just never work out. And then, the last day, I had one more day before I literally turned 50, and it was also the day I was flying back home. I nailed it. I mean, and it was
And that was
tough
from
because I was,
Patu?
no, this was from Toe, actually. This was from Toe from
Ah,
Masu.
okay.
Yeah, then yeah. So this time I mixed. I went a couple of days from Patu, and then I went a couple of days from Asu, from towing, and yeah. I
Towing
mean,
looks,
and
I mean, I've never done it. I've never
oh
done the towing in Brazil, but that seems way more reasonable. I mean, these foot launches that you
yeah.
do down there, they're pretty frightening.
They are, yeah, and the towing is super easy launching. I mean, there's no drama, there's no scenes and all that. The only thing is, and the big advantage is once you're off tow, you're immediately in XC mode. It's not like in Kishidar Patu where you gotta hang around the mount for an hour, sometimes 2 hours before you feel the conditions are good enough to go for it. And by then it's like 8, maybe 8:30 or something. So with the towing, you're off tow. There's no reason to hang around. You just have to go for it.
Koen,
Uh,
is the
uh,
reason you're spending so much time in Brazil rather than Texas is because it's just more consistent? You're just getting a lot more hours. Why aren't you
no,
chasing
to, no,
Texas?
to, No, to be honest with you, it's basically because of work. Like I said, I travel to Latin America and especially to Brazil. To Brazil, I travel maybe 4 times a year, sometimes five
Oh,
times in function of how much business there is. So, once I'm there, my ticket's paid for and all that, I can easily take a few days off. And
Oh,
the
okay.
disadvantage of that is I only get, a handful of days, 4 days, 6 days, whatever. I don't go for like 10 days, 2 weeks in a row usually, also because of family, obligations and this and that. But it's just convenient for me because I'm already there and I love the culture, retrieves. It's not cheap, but it's way cheaper than like in Texas. It seems like I've never been to Texas, but it seems like the logistics are a little harder. But I mean, it's on my list. I'd love to go to Texas. It's not
Now,
like I don't want to
I would
go.
say the logistics are way easier. The big difference between Texas and Brazil was there's several big differences, but one of the
Hmm.
big ones is the roads in Texas are great. So
Right,
that whole Brazil taking all night to get back, you're back pretty quick. The
oh
roads
yeah,
roads are paved. You've
right,
only got
right.
the one little hiccup with the hill country, but even through there, it's pretty good. In my experience, I've only been once. I went down there with Cody a few years ago, and we were trying to snap it, but it's just inconsistent. It's not you're not
Right.
flying every day like you are in Brazil. Part of that inconsistency might have been that we were too picky. I think you really just got to go for it. But there are a lot of days, just like in Tsushima, you just show up and it's blowing too hard. And
Right.
I think also, Sebastian proved that with good forecasting, you can show up and nail it. And I'm just too far away to do that, so
Right. Yeah.
and I think that whole drought index is really important down there. It's got to be a really dry year. And it seems to be, these days
Well,
things are dry around
uh,
here. So probably getting pretty good. But yeah, it's a huge commitment. I mean, if you could, for me, it's a 30-hour drive. If you could show up, Donizete, I think, put a winch out there. If you could show up on a good forecast and do it, then yeah, I think it's got huge potential. But I don't know anybody other
sure.
than Sebastian that's figured that out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Brazil is, I would say it's definitely way more consistent. Like Tasima's the exception, but Batu and Quixadá, if you go in a season, and maybe all year, I've just haven't been there outside of the season, but for the big flights, let's say September, October, November, I mean, I think there's potential for flying a 300-kilometer flight from Batu or Kishida, like pretty much 6 days out of 7. I mean, I've
Yeah,
seen it happen. Like each time I've been there, either I've done a 300 plus flight or somebody else did that day. I don't think there's the occasional blown out day or whatever. But I mean, it's like flyable nearly every day. I'd say 6 days out of 7.
yeah,
And
and
you
see,
don't
that's
have that
not
in
the
too many other
case in
days.
Texas. I think it's the reverse of that. Yeah, so that's the
Yeah.
big
But at
difference.
some point, I mean, you learn, like, initially I'm like, okay, but now I'm at the point I don't want to do another 350-kilometer flight. It's like, and because of what you said, I mean, the retrieve is brutal. You land out freaking 6 p.m. or whatever, if you're lucky, your retrieve driver's there more or less at the same time. This guy's been driving for 12 hours also the whole time. The whole day. He's tired.
Yeah,
I don't,
I
so
really
I
felt
mean,
like it was. I felt like it was pretty unsafe. What we participate in is not very safe, but I don't like that kind of unsafe. Where I don't have any control. It's just,
well,
the
we
roads
switch
are tough.
drivers.
They're
Yeah,
exhausted. There's a lot of animals. It's just, I don't know.
right.
That's just
No,
it's.
it's extremely tiring. The retrieve drives is way more tiring than the flying itself. I can fly 10 hours every day and not be tired of it. But I mean, getting to the hotel after, like you said, and then I got to take the steering wheel because the guy's freaking literally falling asleep. So we switch drivers. And like you said, it's potholes, it's animals. It's like you can't go fast because any given moment there might be a freaking, 6 feet diameter pothole in front of you. So you get to the hotel at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, and evidently you want to fly the next day. So, you got to charge your batteries, get your stuff ready, go to sleep. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
I
a
can't
job.
sleep, so I sleep maybe 1 hour if I'm lucky. And by 4, it's like, beep, 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 time for breakfast. Let's go. All right. Day after day in, day out, you can only do that for so many days before you're trashed.
Well, and you sound like you're uniquely wired for that. Your buddy that you flew with down in Valle, he said he just kept calling me just every day we were going. Just-
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, I'm lucky in that. I mean, I keep up, I do a lot of workout, a lot of cardio and all that. So I'm physically in good shape. I can keep going. That's something, and I just want to keep going. I mean, if I'm in Mexico and it's flyable, I'd feel so bad sitting around not doing anything. I mean,
Hmm.
hell, I'm here for flying. So it doesn't tire me more to be flying than it is to, I don't know, do something else in town or something. So why would I not fly if it's flyable? And if I'm flying, I'm going to try to push to get the most out of the day. And I'm not worried about retrieve because, I mean, especially in Mexico or even Colombia or Brazil, wherever you land, there's going to be somebody that gives you a ride or you can find an Uber I mean, it's never been a problem. I've landed out all over the place in Valle Bravo. And like, as soon as you walk out of the woods, somebody actually literally stopped. I hadn't put my finger out yet and they're, hey, you want to ride? Like, yeah, sure. Thanks. It's so easy.
It's
So
so
I'm not
easy
concerned
there.
about it. And I speak Spanish, so that helps a lot too. I can understand somebody who doesn't speak Spanish might be a little bit intimidated, but other than that, it's super easy. So yeah, I just go for it, man. There's a second goal. So like I said, I've always liked acro pretty much almost as much as like sea flying and all that, as any form of flying really. But in acro, I really wanted to nail the infinite tumble, and I've been trying and trying and trying. True reserve a bunch of times, trying, and never nailed it. And then I felt like I was so close. I was like at 11 o'clock, and I felt like I had to dial in, the rhythm and all that, and I just hadn't pushed through because didn't feel 100% secure. And I felt like I needed one more session at the end of the season to get it done. And then the weather didn't cooperate and I didn't get it done. And then I was 50 and now I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm still working on it, but I'm like, if I can do it, fine. If not, and maybe one day I'll do
You,
some coaching to get
you
there or
don't have
something.
that, 50 motivator now, so it's backed off a little bit, the
Right.
design.
Well, I'll still try for a big flight before my 60. Maybe 500 might be a little ambitious, but I want to reconfirm the 400 kilometers in terms of exceed. That would be fun. But acro, I'm just having fun, and we hadn't touched on that yet. But I've put a tow club together, and that was one consequence of trying to find these places to fly in the Carolinas, and realizing that even with places to fly, the climate here that would just never cooperate. It's just so hard. And then if it does, you don't have a retrieve. And here it is really hard to get back from where you launched from. There's just no public transportation, no Uber, no nothing. So I started realizing, man, if you want to be a good pilot here, you either have to travel or we got to put a tow club together, And I figured if we have a tow club, and we can be on the lake where we also can go see if the conditions turn out to be great that day. We got full flexibility. We'll never have a lost weekend. We'll just go. If it's not good for XC, we'll be doing SIV and acro and this and that. And
Mm.
all at once it turns on, we can just switch gear and take off and go fly XC. And the potential is huge. And miraculously, there aren't a lot of pilots in the Carolinas, but I even drummed up some paramotor pilots and this and that, and somehow I got like 15 people together and convinced them to chip in $1,500 and put a club together like a nonprofit. This was in 2019, was it? And we call it Toasis. A friend came up with his name, Toasis. I thought it was a fantastic
It's
name.
a great
The
name.
official name is Carolina Tow Club. That's our legal name.
Yeah.
So the other idea I had was I'd seen people tow, and it always ends up being the same story. One guy is a tow operator and he knows how to operate it. Nobody else knows or wants to know how to do it and just shows up for towing and then go back home. And the guy on the winch never gets to tow and gets
Right.
frustrated. And within 5 times, you're like, fuck this. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So I figured if this club is going to work, we're going to have to do this in a ways that everybody gets trained as an operator so that we can just take turns. And we're
That's
going to store
great.
the boat right next to the lake. So we found the storage, like the boat's like half a mile away from the lake. Everybody in the club is tech operated, tech rated. Actually, operating the winch is the easy part. There's not much operating once you're in the air. It's mostly the boat that's the hardest part, just
Yeah.
adjusting the speed, the way you take your corners,
Sure.
understanding what the wind's doing higher up, because, you hit a different layer all at once. You get this 20 kilometer now, tailwind or something,
Yeah.
which can mess you up and get slack in the line. So it's been a tough road in terms of making it work, but now we got it dialed in. We reduced the club because we had a lot of sitting ducks, or what do you call that, people that are just never showing up. And it just, I mean, it's great that they were there to get it started. They were, fundamental in getting it started. But now we have a core group of people that are really interested in doing it and wanting to go
Cool.
out. So we're still not getting enough flying, but at least we have an opportunity where we can continue going. And, I got a couple of other buddies that are really stoked about acro. And now I want to start exploring the XC potential there, because I'm sure I can fly 200 kilometers from there someday if it's windy. And but we'll see. Yeah, I'm really honestly, the 400 flight and all that is great, but I think my biggest accomplishment in paragliding is having started this towing club.
Mm.
First of all, because it opens up so many more possibilities, but also because, I mean, I do appreciate and love the community part of paragliding. And we don't have a lot of that around here because everybody
Sure.
lives somewhere else. We all live 2-3 hours apart. There's not really a core group that gets together and, you know, and if we're going to fly a mountaintop, you know how it is. You set up your gear, you're looking at the conditions, you're focused on what you're going to do that day. You fly, you land, try to get back to your car, and then your wife's calling to get back home. So there's not that much opportunity to hang around and have that community feeling. And with the tow club, you 100% depend on these other guys. I mean, you're doing it together. I'm towing, you towing, we tow each other up. You got to trust each other.
Yeah.
You get to know people, their fears, their skills, their lack of skills in certain areas. You help each other and build up on each other's skills.
Everybody gets
So
better.
I love it. I mean, it's my baby.
Man, you got I'm all fired up, man. I'm going to go out and like attack on a mountain or something right now.
Let's go.
You get the energy of a 20-year-old, dude. I love it. Well, thanks for everything you do. Thanks for building the community out there. That's amazing. We've been struggling here with our community, with the insurance problems and all the stuff. And so, and I know what that takes, but, appreciate you, man. Appreciate you keeping the pedal down and, sharing these incredible stories. Awesome, man. And can't wait to fly with you again, bud.
Me too, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Maybe Valle or hopefully before that somewhere else. I'd love it. Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show, Gavin. I really appreciate it. It's been fun talking with you.
It's been fun talking to you, man. Appreciate it. Cheers.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription. And it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.